Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, DwyerVIP.com for premium picks on Roku, Dwyer Sports Betting, Dwyer Boxing News. On Twitter, Gambler's Advisor. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Many people have hit me on Twitter and want to know how I'm playing Kessler versus Froch. Right now, I made a video here online where I said that the person I thought who would win this fight was actually Father Time. I'm expecting the fight to end inside of the distance. If I had to pick one of the combatants, I'm leaning toward Carl Froch. But I believe in playing the fight, given the odds being offered. You've got to take what the casino is giving you, right? And here, I believe the casino is giving you a lot. The under right now on the fight, under 10.5 rounds. In other words, the midway point of the 11th round, right? That under pays you a plus 150. In other words, bet 100 to win 150. To me, that's the compelling play in this fight. But I'm going to hedge it. Because even though I, like Andre Ward, who fought both, and like Joe Calzaghe, who beat an unbeaten Mikkel Kessler, even though I feel that Carl Froch likely wins this fight, especially since the fight's in his backyard, his home country, the hedge is to take Kessler at plus 170 DNB. What that means is that you have Kessler not only to win the fight, but you get your money back if the fight ends by draw. DNB means draw or win. The casino is giving you a plus 170 on the Kessler side of the equation. Understand what this means. If, because part of your bet is the under 10.5 rounds, if Carl Froch, as I suspect he will, wins this fight by knockout, then you actually are collecting money. Because if I have, and I'm going to use round numbers just to make it easy, if I have 100 on both sides of the play, right, understand that if Carl Froch wins by KO within the first, 10.5 rounds, in other words, before the 130 mark of the 11th round, then I collect 150 on the Carl Froch side of the play, the underside of the play, right? And I lose 100 on the Kessler DNB side of the play, right? So I net 50 bucks. If Kessler gets the knockout, and this is what we live for, right? In the first 10.5 rounds of this fight, understand you win both halves of the bet. These are the kind of hedges you want to do, where one of the outcomes gives you the whole bloody thing. You would win on the Kessler side. Let's say I start with 100 on, the under 10.5 at plus 150. And I have 100 on the Kessler DNB side at plus 170. I would win $150 on the under 10.5, plus I would win $170 because Kessler would have won the fight. So I would clear $320 on the exercise. 150 plus 170, and understand I would get back my $200 stake. In other words, the $370 that I would clear would be pure profit, right? So What we're going to do is structure the bet here, the bet I'm pursuing. What you pursue is up to you, because gambling involves great risk and you could lose it all. But the bet I'm pursuing is the under 10.5 at plus 150, hedged with Kessler to win or draw at plus 170. But understand the risk. If Carl Froch gets a stoppage after the midway point of the 11th round in the last round and a half of the fight, or if Carl Froch wins the fight by decision, you lose it all. Okay? Understand the risk. Now let's talk about why I don't believe this fight goes the distance. The first is the first fight. Right? Looking at Kessler at the end of the first fight, it's clear to me that he couldn't make it another 2 full rounds. It's also clear to me in that first fight that Carl Froch, fighting an unfamiliar fighter, took a few rounds to warm up, right? Because Kessler has the physical advantages. Kessler is the faster fighter. The way I see these fighters, I believe Kessler has the physical advantages, but I believe Carl Froch is the creative person in this fight. I think he's the one who's adaptive, reactive. I think he's the one, quite frankly, who has improved steadily throughout his career. The man who enters the ring against Kessler in the rematch is going to be, in my opinion, much better than the man who entered the ring against Kessler in their first fight. And understand, that Carl Froch, this was before he dispatched Youssef Mack and Lucien Bute, that Carl Froch gave Kessler all he could handle, right? That fight was in Kessler's backyard. Kessler, if he nicked it, barely nicked it, right? Don't worry about the judges' scorecards. That's just the official version of the event. What I want you to do is to rely on the unofficial version, your own 2 eyes, right? Just look at the fight. It's razor close. And my point to you is simply that Carl Froch then wasn't the fighter he is today. And the fighter he is today is more of a closer. You remember when Carl Froch, years ago, seemed to be a very slow starter. You remember Carl Froch for the Jermaine Taylor fight, where it looked like he would give away, literally, the first half of a fight. Then Froch would try to come back at the very end, right? That Carl Froch is gone. Just count the number of rounds it took him to dispatch both Bute and Mack, right? Understand that this new Carl Froch starts a lot faster, right? He beat Glenn Johnson by decision. He's no longer giving up the first 6 rounds of the fight. He's also fighting longer. In other words, that jab now, to me, is more of an issue, right? He's throwing it more. In my opinion, it's allowing him to apply even more pressure on an opponent. And of course, Froch throws excellent hooks from very long range, right? He's an interesting individual. And Froch also throws a beautiful uppercut. Let me say this. I talk about mobile power, the ability to throw hard punches from long range, right? Think Deontay Wilder, where the guy's halfway across the ring and he's able to come forward and somehow hit an opponent who doesn't think that he can hit that hard from so far outside. In my opinion, that's Carl Froch, right? Carl Froch literally can hit you from way across the ring. And one of the punches he does it with, and it's rare in boxing, is a very long, very accurate uppercut. Also, people heard me in an earlier video that seems to have gotten some controversy here criticize Lucas Matthysse, a very hard puncher. for throwing punches that missed the mark by very wide margins. Now, Carl Froch is a very hard puncher, but Carl Froch is also a very accurate puncher. Carl Froch reads movement in the ring better than Lucas Mathis. It's interesting because Froch doesn't have great hand speed. So understand, to pull it off, he's literally figuring out where you're going to be before he throws the punch, right? It's not see it, hit it. There's more of a thought process behind the method, right? With regard to Kessler, I'll just say this. He's showing signs of age. Let's remember, he was down against Alan Green. He's been in some slugfests, right? Brian McGee did have some moments against Mikkel Kessler, but Kessler still has a punch because Kessler got up off the canvas against Alan Green and stopped him, right? Kessler beat Brian McGee. Brian McGee, who fought both men, believes that Kessler beats Froch. Here's the catch. McGee fought Froch of several years ago. He didn't fight this Carl Froch. Well, when you have two guys in their 30s, neither of them a defensive wizard, both of the guys with big punches, and both of the guys familiar with each other, right? At least in their minds, they know the other fighter, whether it's true or not. I believe you're going to have a faster start. I believe you're going to have more punches landed. I believe you're going to have a faster finish. Let's also go one step further. One of the fights that left me with some distaste in my mouth was the Andre Ward Kessler fight. Make no mistake, as I watched that fight, I thought Andre Ward owned Kessler. I thought Kessler was getting methodically beaten up. Count me among the skeptics who doesn't believe, not even in the slightest, the headbutt story. Right? The narrative is that Ward was headbutting Kessler, and of course, they had to stop the fight because Kessler was too banged up. Go back and look at that film. That doesn't look like a headbutt fest to me. What that looks like is an embarrassed favorite realizing he was about to lose a fight, needing a storyline to end his misery, right? There are different ways to throw in the towel. I believe Kessler threw in the towel in that Ward fight after he realized he couldn't beat Ward, right? So I believe the way he did that was by complaining about being headbutted, right? Another example, Devin Alexander against Timothy Bradley. One man's opinion. I know it's controversial. I'm just telling you my opinion. I'm not making a statement of fact. But I believe Kessler cashed it in against Ward when he realized he couldn't beat Ward. There is a possibility in this fight, in my opinion. Once a warrior cashes it in like that, once a warrior shows you that he's willing to sidestep a challenge, to live another day, I believe there is a possibility here that Carl Froch gets the upper hand like Andre Ward did, and that Kessler, who has already beaten Froch, looks for a way out. I find it interesting, and I know I'm being hard on Kessler here, but I find it interesting that Kessler found a way out of the Showtime tournament with his title after beating Froch at home, right? You would have thought he would have hung around that tournament, especially since there were other big names in the division in that tournament. Keep in mind, too, that tournament was round robin. There was a possibility that he was going to have another shot at Andre Ward. He didn't want that other shot at Andre Ward. He still hasn't fought a rematch with Ward. If you lost a fight because you thought the other guy was headbutting you and fighting you dirty, if you feel that you would win the fight, if it were a clean fight, why not tie up that loose thread? right? So my point is simply this. Kessler's a mathematician. He knows he's 1-0 against Froch. If he's losing this fight or what have you, don't be surprised if he doesn't claim a Sonny Liston versus Ali type injury to say that he can't continue so that he can live for another day, right? The argument would be that Carl Froch didn't vanquish me. This cut over my eye or this bad shoulder, I believe that's what Liston used, right? This bad shoulder injury KO'd me and didn't allow me to continue, right? Let's hope he doesn't say no mass box like Roberto Duran did in an earlier, generation, blaming indigestion for finding the exit in a big-time fight. So I believe there's a possibility that this fight might end a myriad of ways. Froch by KO, Kessler by KO, Kessler by exit, right? So don't be surprised. Understand, too, young guys, young lions, 22, 23-year-olds, they don't know what losing's about, right? A young unbeaten 22-year-old is in there prepared to fall on his sword, right? He's going to fight to the finish. Older guys over 30 like these guys, who've tasted their mortality, who, even when they haven't been owned in the ring, have colleagues, guys they grew up with, guys they got in the sport with, who've been severely humbled, who were a bit too brave one night and it hurt their career after that, right? Older guys see the sport a little bit differently. Some older guys aren't willing to leave it all in the ring on nights where they feel they're having off nights. This is a hard statement. I believe Mikkel Kessler might be one of those guys. We'll find out. That Ward fight, the end of it, left a bad taste in my mouth. And understand, things like that happen when a guy understands that he's being outgunned and understands that he doesn't fight inside as well as the other guy, right? So, to sum up, the bet I'm recommending, even though I think Froch likely wins the fight by stoppage, the bet I'm recommending is the under 10.5 rounds at plus 150, hedged with Kessler, DNB at plus 170. If your casino's not offering you the win or draw, Kessler simply to win the fight is a plus 175, right? Just food for thought. That's another hedge opportunity. The only problem with that hedge is that if they declare the fight a draw, then you're out on both sides of the play. Okay? Understand the risk. You could lose it all. This is a high-risk play. We're trying to make some money here. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Check your local book. Some great sites for sporting odds are vegasinsider.com, oddschecker.com, right? As well as intertops.eu. Okay, thanks for watching.